I just sent a tweet out that now is something, 100 something thousand likes, where I said, hey, Facebook's now worth $650 billion. Most of that based on the monetization of our data. At this point, Facebook should be paying us for the privilege of using our data.
Yes.
Because they're literally worth like $2/3 of $1 trillion. It's like, wait, how the heck did they become worth $2/3 of $1 trillion if it's free? And the fact is,
yeah.
Again, it's all of the advertisers who want to access us and our preferences and micro-target us and access our data.
Yes, today we are having an important conversation on data as a property right. And in the middle of this episode, we've got a huge announcement talking about what we're doing in this arena. So stay tuned. It's going to be exciting.
I'm super excited about it. I've been chomping at the bit to make this announcement for weeks while we've been working on it. And now it's ready to unveil. Like, I'm more excited about this unveiling than I have been about anything in quite some time. This might be one of the most important episodes we've ever had because we're talking about our data and what we can do to change the balance of power right now between consumers and tech companies. And it's a major problem. It's a bigger problem than most people realize.
Oh, yeah. What's been cool is we've actually dabbled in this a lot. You've had Jaron Lanier on, you've had even Jin Twenge talked about this in a variety of ways, and you kind of touch it on it with Jack Dorsey, even Mark Cuban. So I feel like this would be a good coagulation of all those episodes.
The great thing about it is this is going to be an action-packed episode where we're actually going to be taking action ourselves and encouraging the folks at home to take action. Now, what the hell can you do? I mean, if you're an ordinary consumer, you do the same thing that we all do, which is you show up to Facebook or the app you download on your phone or the website, and then you get hit with this legalese scrolling terms and conditions thing. And how many of us read that? Literally zero of us read that. I think Jaron told a story about how he met with all of the data regulation lawyers in Europe, and he asked them, how many of you read that? And even they shrugged and were like, none of us read it. All we do is we scroll down, we click I agree, and then you figure, well, this shit is free anyway, so how bad could it be? And that's right. Where it gets really interesting, is that there ends up being this hidden cost baked in where freedom is not free, I guess, to use an aphorism that people use in another context. Or we could change it for the internet. Free shit is not free. Now, what happens is that they end up monetizing us in different ways. Some of them very, very successfully. Some of them are now the most valuable companies in the world. So to throw some numbers out there, Facebook is now worth $650 billion, $2/3 of $1 trillion, and the vast, vast majority of that is on the backs of selling access to us and monetizing our data. Now you look up and say, wait, Facebook has 2.2 billion users, so how much of that money is from the US? It turns out that a whole ton of it is, where almost half of Facebook's revenue is from the US and Canada. Despite the fact that we're maybe 10% of that 2.2 billion user base, they make much more money off of Americans than they do, let's say, like someone in Bangladesh or Myanmar or Sri Lanka or whatever. Like they might be using Facebook, but people aren't paying a whole lot to access their data or attention, but they're paying a lot to access our data and attention, which is how Facebook is so valuable today. Now, I want to unpack a few of the effects that this is having on us. There's an upcoming election, and one thing that is happening is that our democracy is getting corrupted and subverted by the sales of our data and metadata to various companies. And I want to say, I know this in part because when we were running for president, my campaign accessed a lot of people's data too, like in a very above board way. Like we were just trying to get people's attention and emails. But then what do? You end up trying to optimize dozens, hundreds, thousands of different Facebook ads to try and reach people. So that's what's happening to everyone. And there are a couple of problems with it. Number one is we all know that foreign actors have gotten pretty good at insinuating themselves in there, creating groups and saying, look, like we're animated about this cause, join this group. And some of it is Russian interference. Some of it may be Chinese interference. Like there are different groups that are trying to gin us up in different ways. Now, Facebook has been stamping that out, but we know some of it's still sneaking through. And it certainly snuck through in a big way in 2016. But even if you discount foreign interference, which I think it's a mistake to discount because it's real, you then are stuck still with millions of Americans who are getting bombarded with various messages that are micro-targeted towards particular issues, particular demographics. The way that Facebook works is that as soon as you have something that works on an audience, then you turn it towards people who have the exact same characteristics in terms of demographic preferences, media consumption. They call it the lookalike group in Facebook.
Right.
And so you have to ask yourself, like, is this positive for democracy when it literally becomes a war of micro-targeted messages and advertising built to animate people around a particular issue? Like, do we think that's actually just information, or do we think that's influence and even subversion? So that, to me, is a very, very real issue. Like, democracy is one giant cause for concern in terms of the sale of our data and our metadata. Now, some people listening to this at home is like, what the heck is metadata? So metadata is the data about the data, like where it's not about me, Andrew Yang, or about you, Zach Grauman. It's about, hey, there's this body of people and here are things that they do. And it's anonymous, but we know that if these people all do this and they have certain traits, then other people will do the same. And so you could look up and say, well, metadata, it's harmless. It doesn't have names on it, doesn't have like specificity, but it's actually in effect the same thing. And so you have the data and metadata being sold over and over again by various companies to the tune of tens of billions of dollars a year in value or more. And that leads me to the second part of this, which is that the economics stink for consumers. It's like if you're signing up for social media networks and websites, and they're then selling your data and metadata over and over again and profiting to the tune of tens of billions of dollars, what are you getting? Well, you're getting ads served to you right and left. You're getting your privacy increasingly subverted. You're getting potentially your attention getting targeted in ways that may not be good for you or may not be good for society as a whole. I just sent a tweet out that now is something, 100 something thousand likes, where I said, hey, Facebook's now worth $650 billion. Most of that based on the monetization of our data. At this point, Facebook should be paying us for the privilege of using our data, because they're literally worth like $2/3 of $1 trillion. And so when you ask yourself, it's like, wait, how the heck did they become worth $2/3 of $1 trillion if it's free, if I'm not paying them every month? And the fact is,
anything. Yeah.
And so you're like, how the heck did that happen? And you know who's paying them? It's like, again, it's all of the advertisers who want to access us and our preferences and micro-target us and access our data and our choices, our likes, the things that we read and consume, who our friends are. So that's how you get to be worth $2/3 of $1 trillion while charging nothing. Like there's a massive cost baked in, and we should be sharing in some of that value. I suggested Facebook should be paying us at this point. So an open question is, how much is Facebook making off of access to our data right now? And you can find out just by digging into the numbers. Like, what is the average revenue per user in the United States for Facebook? So Facebook is making approximately $10 per month from each of us, with a big up arrow attached to it, because that number has gone up and up and up. It was like, $6, $7, $8. Now it's like close to 10. And so that's at a minimum the starting point of our value just to one company. I mean, albeit one of the biggest companies that we all know and understand. So the next thing you have to understand is that there's now this whole network of companies. So Facebook, Google, the biggest and most conspicuous. But at this point, there are data brokers. There's an entire multi-billion-dollar industry of selling and reselling our data in different ways. Everything from Evite to the car company to the like Sam's Club. You know, anyone who ends up developing this giant list of consumers and some aspect of their behavior, then turn around and sell that data to various people in different ways. Now, not everyone's doing it, but a lot of people are doing it. And some of it's specific, some of it's anonymous. How many of you have looked up and gotten some email and you're like, I don't remember signing up for this shit? How many of you have had an email conversation about a particular topic and then all of a sudden you saw an ad based on that topic on a completely unrelated website? You're like, you know, you're like talking about going on vacation and all of a sudden you start getting served up all these like, you know, beach vacation ads like everywhere you go.
I will say this, Andrew, when we finished the campaign, the number of people, other campaigns or organizations that reached out asking for our email list to sell it was not a small number. There were a lot. Now our decision was that we're never doing it. We don't need it. It's not worth the money. We don't think it, I mean, it is a lot of money though. They were talking about, we have about a 1 million person plus email list. You're talking about a couple dollars an email. It's a lot of money. It felt wrong. And here's the other thing. The Democratic Party does this too, man. Like that publicly available data, when you donate to a political campaign, is scraped by these algorithms. And then I know plenty of our donors that are getting emails from other campaigns that we didn't sell the list. They're getting it from even publicly available data that people are brokering. So I've felt this personally just running our own org, you know?
Yeah, I remember having the conversation, you and I, and being like, hey, let's never sell our list to anyone because it really pains me to think about someone who donated $5 to us or signed up for our email list and all of a sudden they're getting spammed by all these other candidates or orgs or causes, even though some of them I'm sure are great candidates or orgs or causes. But I was just like, it just seemed like a raw deal to you and me. So we forewent any kind of payout on the base of our list. Thank goodness, because, you know, it would have been a shitty thing to do. In my mind, it would have been a violation of trust.
And hypocritical.
But I'm sure that like folks are getting targeted anyway because of publicly available data, because that's just the nature of donation. And that pains me too. It's like that's like an aspect of what we're talking about, which is that at this point, we are ourselves almost like a product that's just getting sold and resold to anyone who thinks that they can get a bit of our attention and money. So those are two major concerns in my mind. One is the sanctity and efficacy of our democracy in a true way, like whether that's being subverted. Number two is the economics are all wrong for individuals. And then number three is something we talked about with Gene and other people and Jaron, and we touched on it just now. But this entire zoo is really bad for our mental health, where like you have these billion-dollar organizations constantly trying to like target your attention, and it ends up, if you're an adult, it ends up numbing you, where you're just like, oh, like, you know, what is someone trying to get my attention about today? If you're in certain groups, you actually become less healthy. And Jaron talks about this. Jaron said that, and he's right, that negative sentiments and emotions spread more powerfully via social media than in other ways. And so social media is serving to make us all more irritable and more paranoid. And this is a byproduct of the fact that these companies know so much about us, they target us, they follow us around. And so that's why many of us have this sinking feeling that we're like rats in a maze, and then we're getting peppered with little like bits of cheese or breadcrumbs, like just getting pegged at our heads all the time. And this is one reason why Jared's like, hey, you know what would be better? It's like if you just unplug. But for many people, it's not realistic to unplug entirely. And this is having a particularly disastrous effect on our young people, where rates of anxiety and depression have surged among teenagers and teenage girls, in part because we're letting ourselves get pushed into this environment where our attention is the commodity. Like every click and every action we take is getting sold and resold to people who want to reach us. And the experience that Jaron contrasted all this with is something like Netflix, where you pay for Netflix and then Netflix tries to serve you movies and like TV shows that they think you'll like. but it's not like you're getting bombarded with third-party ads when you're in Netflix. So Netflix seems like a fine whole experience. And so Jaron was suggesting it's like, you know what? If we actually were forced to pay for Facebook and then you just dial down all of the selling and reselling of our data, all of the advertisements, then it would be a completely different experience because the incentives of the organization change.
Right.
This episode is brought to you by Tommy John. What is Tommy John? Tommy John is ultra cool cotton underwear that's designed so that it helps like operate as a cooling system for the summer. So if you're the type of person that gets sweaty and warm easily, you should check out Tommy John underwear. Zach's been a fan since before they sent us free stuff.
I had this dream, Andrew, that we would start a podcast together, and on this podcast, we would sell underwear. And now we are living that dream. And to be honest with you, Tommy John underwear is badass. I learned this about not from these guys. My brother is a huge fan, and he's like, just don't buy anything but Tommy John. It works. It's breathable. No sweat. No nothing. I felt like an underwear model. I put it on. I was like, wow, this is like slimming, feeling good. You know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Wow, dude. Wow, Spanx for men. All right, so for a limited time, go to TommyJohn.com/Yang to get 20% off site-wide. That's TommyJohn.com/Yang for 20% off site-wide. See site for details. Get your trousers, get your underwear at Tommy John.
TommyJohn.com/Yang. That's a good deal, too. These are good underwear, high quality. 20% off is a big deal. You want something crazy? We had a couple ad agencies come up to us during the campaign. I've had this in other orgs I've run too, is that this ad agency was telling us that they can track, apparently anonymously, your web traffic. And so basically the cookies on a web browser. But what they did is they segmented people based on basically likeliness and correlations to do certain activities. So what they could tell, and they could segment their consumers. So if you read Business Insider, they would also know that you're likely to buy a Subaru and likely to shop at freshly.com or whatever it is. And they have hundreds of thousands of these segmentations. And one, I don't believe that it was anonymous, but two, like, it's really creepy what they can learn about you. It's driving us nuts, but it also, like, there's some sort of big brother aspect to that I've never really felt comfortable with.
Well, certainly it makes you feel much less unique and like an individual. It's like, oh, snap, I also read Business Insider and drive a Subaru. And you're like, maybe I should be.
That's true. You find how predictable you are. Fair enough.
So those are some of the big problems. I'd say those are the big three. There are others. Is like our democracy being subverted. The fact that billions and tens of billions of dollars are changing hands, and we are seeing none of it. And then the fact that this is all bad for our culture, our society, our mental health, our kids' mental health. It leads us almost to interact with the world like we are ourselves, like a product, and it's dehumanizing. We're sanding down all of the things that make people distinct and human. Even like the word content now, it's like you and I are having this conversation, and we're obviously digitizing it. It's a podcast, and it'll, be out there on the internet. And the word content is now being applied to just about really anything that commands your attention for like a moment. It's like, well, that was like a moving performance, like good content. That's a good idea. So
that's true. So
the big question is, what the heck can we do about all of this, given that we are completely outgunned by these tech companies, these billion-trillion-dollar tech companies that are, and our government obviously is nowhere on the scene. Like, our government is just looking up like a trained seal going, or, and like clapping its hands, being like,
Yeah.
and the issues that our government chases down are built not on any systemic approaches, but it's just like a headline or a tweet, or like, Donald Trump didn't like the fact that Twitter fact checked a couple of his tweets. So then he like signed some phantom weird executive order based on a 25-year-old law that, was made before Facebook even existed. It, it was applied to like GeoCities or whatever. like in theory, our government would have a more intelligent approach to all this, but our government
or they're complicit, man. Like how many elected officials are getting elected or raising money because of Facebook ads right now? They have no incentive to regulate this.
I don't have a problem. I have a problem with the fact that they're so behind on regulating. Like certainly if you're using Facebook ads and using them well, like it's okay, because how else are you going to reach people at this point? Like one of the things I figured out when I was running my education company was we were spending a ton of money on Facebook, Google, Facebook in particular. And at one point I realized that Facebook is like a proxy for the internet if you're trying to reach people, because like they'll be on it, like many people of particular demographics will be on it significantly every day. And so when you were trying to reach people, you just like pumped your ad dollars into it. It reminds me a little bit of the dialing for dollars that politicians do, where it's like you just sit there and like soullessly call donors and ask for money, and it's the worst thing in the world. I hated doing it. But then when you're in there, part of the system, you're like, well, now I'm kind of good at it, so do I want to do away with a system that enables me to like stave off any newcomer? It's like, now that I'm in here and I've got my call list, like this is like my moat. It's very dark and very screwed up. So for the individuals who are listening to this being like, okay, I buy that this is a problem. We've been slipping down this slope for a while now. What are we going to do about it? So we're going to be talking to a friend of mine for years who's now leading the Data Dividend Project, which Humanity Forward is very proud to be front and center on and a part of. And we're launching this project to try and activate the data property rights for everyone listening to this right now. That when I was running for president, I said, look, your data is yours, and if anyone's profiting from it, it should be you. You should have certain rights that are common sense and we all understand. You should know what is happening to your data. You should know if it's being sold or resold. You should be able to turn it off if you want. You should be able to move it to another place if you want, so you're not trapped with a particular company forever. And you should be able to share in the value. Now, I'm excited to say that this is no longer hypothetical. California and Nevada have passed laws saying that consumers have these rights. And in California, the law went into effect January 1 of 2020, and it will start being enforced July 1 of 2020, which is like freaking, the next week or two.
2 weeks, yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to get in on this consumer revolution to take back our data property rights, go to ddpforall.com, and all you need to do is give us just a few basic pieces of info and say, check the box being like, yes, I want you to fight for my data rights with the tech companies. And we will then take a unified front to the tech companies and say, look, you owe all of these people information on what the heck you're doing with their data, what's happening to it, who's getting it, the ability to turn it off, the ability to move it, and what kind of money are you making, because our people deserve it. It's their data. It should be their money too.
So this is the big announcement. So we have launched with Humanity Forward, led by Andrew, what we're calling the Data Dividend Project, DDP, and we're going to try to get you, the American people, paid for your data. Because apparently no one's doing this, so we're going to try it. And all you have to do is go to ddpforall.com, and you sign up very quickly. I just did it today. It's like name, email, your city, and then you sign, like you agree that we will fight for you. And then as soon as we can, and it could be 2 months, it could be a year, who knows, but we will basically gather as many users as we can and go to these tech companies and fight and get you paid. So that's the dream. It's pretty exciting, Andrew. And surprising no one's tried to do this yet. And we're excited to be, I think it's a role that you play, Andrew, in that you can be a trusted source. Like, no, you're clearly, we don't even profit from our own data, right? That, even though we could. Like, we're clearly in this for Humanity Forward reasons, to try to get people paid for the data they're not getting paid for. And maybe never will if no one does anything. They're not getting paid for at this time.
Well, the great thing, Zach, is there's so many parts of the puzzle that we can accelerate. So this is a law that's on the books in California. The tech companies are trying to lobby to have it enforced in really pathetic, watered-down ways, as you can guess. But in California, the law's on the books. It can be enforced. Nevada, same thing. And New York, Texas, other states are looking at it and thinking they should follow California's lead and have the same law on the books. So we can ramp up the pressure on state legislatures to pass something like the California Consumer Privacy Act in their states. And if you're a state legislature, why the heck wouldn't you do this? Like, look out for your people, look out for your consumers and citizens, like California did, like Nevada did. And so you can see the tech companies are looking up being like, oh, what does this mean for us? It could be enormously transformative. And we can be at the frontier of pushing that to state legislatures, because we can go, thanks to you all who sign up at ddpforall.com, we can be like, look, we represent hundreds of thousands, even millions of American consumers. These are the people in your state, in your district that care, that want this. Let's get it done. And then after we get the rules in place, then we can actually start carving up the pie in a way that makes sense for consumers. Because again, you click, you think, oh, it's free. But then like you get this sinking feeling. It's like, whoa, this is actually not the sweet deal I thought it was. It is not the sweet deal you thought it was. And we're going to make it so it is a sweet deal where you can actually start resting easy on the fact that your data is not being mishandled or sold to folks that you don't want it sold to, that you're going to get money for every time any money gets generated from your data, which is all the time. We'll be able to sleep easier knowing that our democracy is actually functioning better for the fact that we're not all getting just like sold crap like rats in a maze and the rest of it. And we may even be able to help look out for the mental health of our kids and ourselves. So there are enormous upsides to this initiative, this revolution. And I'm just excited that we can play such an important role, because when this came up, I looked at it and I was like, wait, this law's on the books. What? Like, why aren't people rallying around this? And then you look around and being like, who exactly would rally people around this? The tech companies obviously don't want to touch it. You know, the tech companies are trying to bury it. Most politicians don't understand these issues terribly well. And to the extent they do understand these issues, it's like, well, I represent some particular state. It's like, is this really front and center for my people? It should be front and center for us as a country. Right. And I am thrilled to be leading this fight. I hope that you sign up. I hope that anyone listening to this, if you have friends, you're like, yo, sign up at ddpforall.com, because there's zero downside and you might get money and might cause a consumer revolution to have us all be treated like human beings instead of rats in a maze. This is particularly true if you have friends in California and Nevada, because we might be able to get them cold hard cash in a reasonable time frame, because these tech companies have legal obligations in those states that they are not living up to.
This is what I'm so excited about. Like, what a cool vision where we finished the campaign and now we start getting people actually paid for the data they should be getting paid for. That's the dream. That's the vision. ddpforall.com. And you talk about it with Enoch in the rest of this episode.
Yeah, so I sit down with the CEO of the Data Dividend Project. He's one of the foremost litigators in the country. It's very handy because, you know, at some point you do need to sit down and negotiate and hammer out settlements and deals with these companies. So thrilled to be working with him to activate our data property rights. What I love about this is like it's not frankly like the political bullshit. It's like, oh, we should do something about it. Like, we actually can do something about it together. That's one thing I really pride this organization on and myself on, is like, I never wanted to be a dude who talked about shit. Like, I see myself as like a man of action. Now, sometimes talking is an action, and I get that. But being able to actually fight for people's data rights for real makes me so happy. You know, the fact that we're distributing economic relief, I think we're now past the $5 million mark. Thank you to everyone who donated to Humanity Forward. But it's one thing to stand up and say, hey, we should be giving people money during this time, which we should, clearly. And any member of Congress who's not for emergency cash relief should get voted out. And we need to vote someone in who understands what the heck is going on. But then we don't just talk about it. We do it. Yep. We're like, hey, you know, now like tens of thousands of people have gotten micro grants thanks to our generous donors. You know, suing the state of New York when they tried to like have it so that people couldn't vote. I mean, like, that was bullshit. And so instead of being like, that's wrong, I'm being like, hey, let's just try and fix that. So the data property rights is the biggest example of this, where it's like, we can talk about it, we can do something about it. If enough of us get together, we can 100% hold these companies' feet to the fire, change the practices, put pressure on legislators so they have to actually do the right thing. We can spoon feed them the information about it, because if they don't understand it, we get enough people excited about it, then they'll just be like, okay, what's my downside of emulating this California law or eventually passing federal legislation? For better or for worse, more and more people are waking up to the fact that free is not the deal we thought it was, and that there are real costs. In economic terms, they're called externalities. There are massive externalities to the arrangements we've made, where we have some of the biggest companies in the world that are ad supported, and like the advertising model has some real drawbacks, some real problems. Imagine for a moment if you had Netflix and it was ad supported. Like, hey, Netflix is free, but you go on there and then all of a sudden you got bombarded with shit. Like, you know, like people just trying to sell you stuff right and left. Like, Netflix would suck. You know what I mean? It's really interesting to have as like a contrast. It's like, you know, like if you had paid Netflix and free Netflix, paid Netflix is like infinitely better than free Netflix, or like quote unquote free but ad supported.
Correct.
You know, Jaron said it. He's like looked up and said, hey, we needed a business model and we chose ad supported. And we're like, well, that seemed like a fine choice at the time, but now that choice has been revved up to this insane degree that threatens to turn us on each other, make us completely incoherent, and make it so that our democracy no longer functions.
So today we talk about the Data Dividend Project, ddp4all.com. Andrew sits down with Enoch, the CEO of the Data Dividend Project, to tell you about how it works, why it's important, and frankly, how we can scale this around the country and get you paid for your data.
Let's go get that money. You all know Andrew Yang is about getting people that money. This is another way we can get you that money. I'm all about it. I hope you're all about it too. And yeah, excited to sit down with Enoch. Coming up after the break, my conversation with the CEO of the Data Dividend Project, the brilliant, the innovative Enoch Liang. What if you don't want to go out, but you need a stamp? And you're not going to believe this, but there's a company that's going to address that problem for you. And it is called stamps.com.
It's true.
Yeah. If you go to stamps.com,
problem.
you can print postage on demand, skip the line, skip the crowd, skip the mask. You can save some money even. And if that wasn't enough, stamps.com offers UPS service with discounts of up to 62% and no surcharges. So that's stamps.com. It's going to bring the post office right to your computer and the safety of your own home. It's very 21st century. I mean, I'm actually a fan of the post office, but I'm an even bigger fan if you can just print it out on your computer, because that's just a win for us all. And right now, listeners to Yang Speaks get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a free digital scale without any long-term commitment. You can weigh yourself on the scale. No, you can't, because it's not that kind of scale. Just go to stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage and type in Yang. That's stamps.com, enter Yang. Let's keep you safe and sound with stamps in your pocket. Thank you, stamps.com. Very excited to welcome to Yang Speaks my old and dear friend, Enoch Liang. Enoch, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Yeah, it's great to see you. So Enoch is the CEO and co-founder of the Data Dividend Project. Now, what the heck is that? We're about to get into it. But Enoch and I know each other because we were law school classmates in the late 90s. Enoch went on to become one of the most accomplished litigators in the country. So when we were in law school learning, like, Enoch actually took it to heart and figured out how to become an accomplished trial lawyer and litigator, while I ended up becoming an entrepreneur who hires lawyers because I don't trust myself.
Andrew, you've been doing pretty good in litigation yourself lately.
Yes, 1-0 against the New York State Board of Elections. Thanks for noticing, man. We didn't even need to get you. So one thing I said all the time on the trail was that data is the new oil, that our data is now the most valuable asset in the world, and we are none the wiser. We're not seeing a dime of it.
Yes, Andrew, taking that analogy one step further, if you were to imagine that the tech companies are they've each built their own car with their own proprietary engine, but that car isn't going to go anywhere without fuel. What's the fuel of the 21st century? It's data, right? And that data fuel right now, we're just giving it away for free and powering these tech companies' engines to just make more and more and more money, extract more and more and more value. And I think something that Americans don't know about is that tech companies are taking our data directly, that data fuel, and putting it in their car, but they're also going out and buying it. They're going and buying it from gas stations, otherwise known as data brokers or data resellers. And not only are we giving the fuel directly to the tech companies, but these data brokers and resellers are selling it to the tech companies at gas stations, and we're not seeing any value from that either.
Yeah, and this gets even darker when you realize that these mammoth tech companies are paying zero or near zero in taxes very oftentimes. And so the public's really getting squeezed of value in more ways than one. It's incredible that our leaders are so behind the times that we're just looking around saying, yeah, this is appropriate. It's completely unacceptable what we've allowed to happen.
Yeah, and that reminds me of something I think that you either said on the debate stage or in the interviews, which is our government is like literally 25 years behind, because 25 years ago, when you and I were in law school and first met each other, was when the government Department of Technology regulation was abolished. Is that what it was called?
The Office of Technology Assessment. They got rid of it in the mid-late 90s. So we're now flying blind, and our legislators don't have a clue about technology because they just get their information from the tech companies.
Right.
So one of the things that I was passionate about on the campaign trail, which now you are going to become one of the leading champions in the world on, is data as a property right. Our data should be ours, even if we decide to loan it out. And the exciting thing is, it seems like the state of California and some other places agree.
The California Consumer Privacy Act gives California consumers a bundle of rights that relate to data privacy and data as property. And my guess is your policy people were actually referring to the CCPA before it went into effect.
Yeah, completely. We're very open to finding like work other people have done. So this went into effect in January. What rights does it give the people of California?
Well, a couple of rights, and I'll just go into them. The first one is the right to know what personal information is collected, used, shared, and sold. The right to delete personal information held by businesses about consumers. The right to opt out of the sale of personal information. And then the right to non-discrimination in terms of price or service of goods when a consumer exercises a privacy right under the CCPA.
So I'm guessing that the vast majority of people have never heard of this stuff. And so what they're thinking is like, okay, how does this affect me? So first, is this only in California? There are other states that either have done something similar or are doing something similar?
Maine and Nevada currently have laws on the books. And there's about another 10 to 12 states that are considering data privacy legislation, like Arizona, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, South Carolina, Texas. So this is starting to become a thing.
Well, a good thing, because if you're the consumer, you're completely in the dark. You get some I agree or I consent button that comes up with a bunch of mumbo jumbo, and you skip the mumbo jumbo and you click that button, and then you use that service, and then you just hope that nothing goes wrong later. And then occasionally you get notified that there's been some breach or hack, or you get fed ads everywhere you go where you're like, I was just emailing my cousin about a parka, and then all of a sudden I'm getting parka ads or whatever like the case may be. So that's the way most people interact with this stuff.
You know, in reality, it really isn't a choice if you think about it. You spend $300 on a smartphone and sign up for $50 a month of phone and data service, and you come home and you turn on that phone, and the first screens that come up are these end user license agreements and these privacy policies and these terms and conditions. And you and I are lawyers, Andrew, and I'll tell you what, I would have a very hard time reading that and figuring it out. And if you don't click agree, then that expensive smartphone that you just bought isn't going to work. So it's really, not a choice at all. You just paid hundreds of dollars for this smartphone, and you have to go through all these licenses before it even turns on and works. And it's the same for almost every app that you download, right? And so I think Americans have just become desensitized to these terms and conditions and privacy policies where they just click agree, 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 and hope for the best. So I completely agree with you there. I
agree with you. It's like a false choice or an illusion of choice, because let's say you don't agree or you don't consent. What the heck happens next? I mean, no one knows. You just back out. and then you don't use this thing called the internet.
Yeah. I mean, could you imagine if you applied this to real life? It'd be like you go into the car dealership and you buy a car, and before you drive off the lot, you have to agree to 50 pages of terms and conditions. And one of them is, we can, by the way, track you everywhere you go. And we can use that location data from tracking you to serve you ads and basically follow you everywhere. I think Americans would revolt if that was the case when they buy a car. But that's the way the internet has been essentially built from the beginning, and it's only getting worse.
What is going wrong right now? If I'm a consumer and I just agreed to everything and was like, whatever, maybe I get served ads.
Well, it's more than that, right? The data that is being collected and sold and resold about American consumers is used for all kinds of things. It's used for credit scores. It's used for health insurance premiums. It's used for automobile premiums. And, sometimes that data that's collected is wrong. It might be for somebody else named Andrew Yang. And,
there are a lot of us out there. I feel bad for the other ones. No, I don't. I mean, I should be excited for them, I guess. But anyway.
And so you don't know why your credit score is going down. You don't know why your premiums are going up, and you don't really have a recourse for it.
To me, the thing that I find offensive is that my data gets sold and resold and packaged and repackaged, and people are making money off it, and I'm not. I mean, isn't it my data? If someone's making money, it should be me. And it could be that if someone's making money and they say, look, I'm making money, you wouldn't make this money without me, maybe we split it. I would find that at least somewhat more acceptable than somehow my data is yours to profit from.
I think that the more Americans are educated about this process, the more outrage they are going to feel. For example, there's an entire data brokering and data reselling industry out there. That's a $200 billion a year industry. And unlike, let's say, a Google or a Facebook or an Amazon, these data brokers and data resellers are not providing consumers with any goods or services.
Oh my gosh. It's just a secondary market for our data, and they make money, and that's it? And we don't get any of that?
Exactly. They don't provide us any goods or services, and they're just making money off the backs of American consumers' data. And sometimes it's, very, very private information that you wouldn't want to share. For example, data brokers, it's been publicly reported, are selling lists of people who have taken antidepressants in the past, or whether you're an alcoholic, or whether you or someone in your family has cancer or heart disease or hypertension, whether you're gay or straight, whether you have an eating disorder, and outrageously, whether you were the victim of sexual assault. This is the type of very, very private data that goes beyond just the census level data that data brokers and data resellers are selling and reselling and packaging about Americans.
And the most valuable category is healthcare data. If you know what's going on with me and my need for insulin or antidepressants, that's very, very profitable. So that's the current state of affairs. And does this California law change that state of affairs for the consumer?
It does for the individual consumer, because the individual consumer, like we said, can exercise his or her right to deletion, his or her right to opt out. But it's going to take a movement, and it's going to take collective action to change things on a broader scale.
So these laws, the ink's barely dry on this law. And then I go to Facebook and say, hey, I've got the right to know. I've got the right to delete. I'm going to exercise them. Right now, can I do that?
You can. An individual can certainly go and wade through the privacy policy or the terms and conditions on a Twitter or, let's say, a data broker, and exercise your right to know what data is being collected about you, your right to delete, and your right to opt out.
So has anyone tried that?
There are definitely tech journalists who have exercised their rights under the CCPA and then written about it. One tech journalist actually exercised her rights under the CCPA for facial recognition, and some of the stuff that came back was actually pretty scary because it wasn't all her. So it has happened. Because the law is brand new, the law gives corporations quite a bit of time to respond, at least initially. And then, after the first year or so, then the time to respond becomes shorter and shorter. But there are individuals that have done that and have reported on it.
But I think you and I both agree that it's not like we should all become our own data cops because, one, we have better things to do, but two, we're completely outgunned.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what sparked the idea for the Data Dividend Project, or as we like to call it, DDP.
After one of my favorite pro wrestlers, Diamond Dallas Page.
That's right.
Maybe that'll help some people remember it.
That's right. So, Andrew, I'm not a data privacy lawyer, but I have to say, when I heard you speaking on the trail about how data is more valuable than oil and how they're hoovering it up and monetizing it, that caused me to go and actually take a deeper dive into this. And I spoke to some data privacy lawyers and I read the statutes and thought, wow, this is something that's affecting all Americans. It's affecting all consumers. This is something that's really important that Americans should know about. And that's what was kind of the genesis that led to DDP.
Now, so what is DDP? If I'm a consumer that wants to activate my newfound data property rights, what do I do?
Well, DDP is a movement to basically harness the collective bargaining power of all California consumers.
And eventually all Americans, it sounds like, because if you're in Nevada, Maine,
right,
eventually New York, New Hampshire, all these other places.
Exactly. We didn't have a choice when it came to clicking agree, agree, agree. I mean, it was a false choice. Either you agreed to the licensing terms or your smartphone didn't work.
Or you're living in a cabin in the woods.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the idea is to build a movement with, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of consumers so that tech companies don't have a choice but to listen to us. And that collective action, that collective bargaining component is what DDP is trying to harness. And the technology companies have banded up and explicitly tried to weaken the CCPA.
I bet.
I mean, it was
if you're a freaking giant tech company, you're like, and let's not give you these rights. That would be fantastic. I'm making money. I don't really need to deal with this headache.
Right. And that is one reason that the California Privacy Rights Act is on the ballot in November 2020 is because the CCPA got watered down by the tech companies' lobbyists. And so the CPRA is on the ballot to kind of restore those rights and create a California Privacy Protection Agency. So if there's a movement and there's a lobbying group by the technology companies, then there needs to be a movement by the consumers. And that's what DDP is creating.
Now, and so everyone knows, Humanity Forward is partnered with DDP to make this happen because I believe, and there's no other way to make it happen except to get a bunch of us together and go have, let's say, world-class lawyers and negotiators sit down with the tech companies and say, hey, here are our property rights under the law, and you are not complying, or we have hundreds of thousands of people that want to be able to audit their data, want to be able to share in the value. So if there's an individual that wants to join this movement, what do they do? Where do they go?
They can go to ddpforall.com and fill out the form there. Then you'll be part of the movement.
DDP and then the words for all, FORALL.com?
Yep, ddpforall.com.
And so I take it if I go to ddpforall.com, there'll be a little explainer and whatnot, but this thing's free. How long does it take? What do I actually do when I get there?
It's free to sign up for. And when you get there, you put in the information that the technology companies are going to require from DDP to exercise your rights collectively.
So what's that? That's like my name, what is it?
Yeah, it will be your name, your address, your phone number, as many emails as you can remember that you've used. I'm old school, so I have an old school Yahoo email, but that I don't use as much now, but I also have a Gmail.
I have a Hotmail too. Is there a technical term for our AOL or Hotmail or Yahoo accounts that we give to companies we don't want to hear from. It's like the retail checkout email. What's that? I'm at Banana Republic. You want an email address? Sure thing. You know, Andrew Yang 113 at Hotmail. That's not my email address.
We should come up with a term for that.
There, it should be. It should be like that phone number that you give to someone at a bar you don't want actually to call you. Is there a name? Is there a name for that? Not that that's ever happened to me. I've just heard about this.
Used to happen to me all the time.
What was like the term for that thing? It's like, I guess it's just fake number. Yeah. While we're at it, we should talk about like the hierarchy of email address suffixes, where if someone says this is my email address, then you judge them. So I feel like Yahoo is acceptable still, in a way that AOL and Hotmail are not. Gmail is obviously the premium. And then like at me or mail.com, like those are cool. There's someone should just come up with a hierarchy for this stuff.
And what it says about you, especially to like younger people and millennials, right?
Well, I'll tell you, if you have AOL, that means you're probably older, and it probably means you vote. So those are the people I needed to be hunting down. Like I needed to get to the freaking AOL universe. Anyway, you show up at ddpforall.com, you fill in your basic info, some old email addresses.
Right. And then you sign what's known as an authorized agent agreement, which designates DDP to act as your authorized agent to exercise your rights under the CCPA.
So how long does that take at ddpforall.com, this whole thing?
3 minutes. I just tested it myself the other day. I think the hardest part about it was trying to remember my old email addresses.
All right. So I spent 3 minutes at ddpforall.com, and then what?
And then we need to reach a critical mass in order to exercise collective action. And so if only 1 or 2 or 10 or 15 or even 1,000 people are exercising their rights, I think the technology companies and the data brokers are going to ignore that. It's going to take a critical mass of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in order to really hit them where it counts.
Well, I'm sure we can get that many people, because a lot of people are going to agree with you and me on this. But if I'm a user and I sign up 3 minutes, after that, am I all set?
If you want to sign up for a newsletter, or if you want to come visit our blog once in a while so we can keep you informed about legislative developments in your state, that's an option that you can check when you sign up. But other than that, hopefully we'll be reporting back on good news.
And what does that news even look like? What does victory look like?
Well, I think victory, the long-term goal of DDP, is to eventually create an exchange. So if you highly value your privacy, you don't want anybody to track your online activity ever, then you can go totally dark on this exchange. But if you're okay with sharing some of your data and receiving targeted advertising in exchange, then you can go on and turn on some tracking, and in return you'll get what's called a data dividend, maybe some type of small payment. The ultimate point, and this is what DDP wants to accomplish, is that it's your personal choice about your personal privacy. Right now, none of us have any personal choice about our privacy online.
So you're saying that if someone goes to ddpforall.com, signs up, there is a possibility down the road that they're actually going to achieve my beautiful vision of sharing in the spoils from their data, so that they'll actually get cash from DDP if we are able to bargain with the tech companies for these rights?
Yes, that's absolutely the goal. But again, it's going to take critical mass to achieve that goal.
That's a beautiful vision. And that's why I'm so excited about this, is that, again, it's our data, it's our property. If there's value being generated, we should have it. And one reason I'm so excited about DDP is I want to get people that value, that money. I want millions of people to sign up at ddpforall.com and then forget about it for a while, and then get some communication some number of weeks or months later saying, great news, we've won, and here's your money, or here are your choices, and if you make this choice, here's your money. Nothing would make me happier. Everyone knows Andrew Yang just loves giving people money. I wish that we were just giving people money right and left, and this is a way we can get people money for their data that they should have been getting the entire time. That's why I'm so excited about this. Maybe I'm just, sort of I'm primitive, but I think in those ways. I just think get that cash, get that cheddar, get that money, get those data bucks, get that data dividend. So I'm all about it. And I got to say, when we talk about gathering critical mass, like my vision is this, is that we get a certain number of people together and then we have a victory and then they get some money. It doesn't need to be big money. Let's call it like $20. But can you imagine how excited that person will be to like tell their friends, being like, hey, you wouldn't believe this. I signed up at ddpforall.com, forgot about it for a while. I just got $20. You sign up too. Maybe you won't get $20 because your data is not as valuable as mine, or maybe you'll get a lot more. And then it will spread like wildfire. But we need to start this movement and then start getting us our own value for our data where it belongs in our hands. So yeah, man, I'm so excited you came to us at Humanity Forward with this, because we're going to be pushing for this until those data dividends start flowing back to consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that these times with the COVID-19 pandemic is making this all the more urgent, right? Because our lives are moving more and more and more online because we can't see people face to face as much or as safely. I heard you talking about this article you read when you had Sam Harris on this podcast about 10 changes that are accelerated, 10 technological changes that are accelerated because of COVID-19. And man, every single one of those technological changes involves data privacy, data rights, data as property. And now is more urgent than ever that we get started on retaking what should have been ours in the first place.
And this is the perfect time because the California law goes into effect essentially right now, Nevada law right now, Maine law right now, and then all of these other states are going to follow suit soon. So if you're in a state that has not been mentioned here, feel free to reach out to your state legislators, your reps, being like, hey, you know what you should do? Just like draft the California law and throw it on the books. Who's going to be against this? You know what I mean? It's like every consumer is going to be like, heck yes, we should have that right. As a presidential candidate, I was saying we should just federalize it, but no need to wait. We can do this right now. It's on the books in states around the country.
And even if you're not in California, Maine, or Nevada, you can still come to ddpforall.com and sign up so that we can contact you when legislation in your state starts moving. Or better yet, we can contact you about how to write your state senator or your state congressperson to get legislation like this introduced in the first place.
What's at stake to me is fundamental. It's not just the money, though I'm all about the money, but it's about our agency as human beings. It's about the way we make decisions. Someone called it data dignity. Right now we are being essentially sold off as commodities, and it's dehumanizing. We need to have agency. We also need to make sure that the decisions we're making are ours, and it's not that we're just being led through a digital maze like freaking rats. Where they just keep like hitting you with various things and you're like, oh yeah, like, and you think you're making choices, but really it's because they've been influencing you with dozens and dozens of messages and contacts. It's like, if that's going to happen, then we at least need to be aware of it and partners in it and profit from it.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the data dignity and the data as a human right idea, because, this really goes back to privacy and property, right? Privacy is a fundamental human right that should be enjoyed by everyone, like free speech, right to a fair trial, etc. Like, for example, in California, the California Constitution actually gives each person the inalienable right to pursue and obtain privacy. And in today's online world, there's literally zero privacy unless, you're using a VPN blocker or some type of search engine like DuckDuckGo. So one way to restore that privacy is to make sure that people own their own data. Your data should be your property. And I think that everybody understands this in the offline world, but in real life, like if you have a house, you have the right to control who uses that land. You have the right to keep people off of it. Maybe one person values her privacy greatly, so she posts a no trespassing, no soliciting sign, puts her mailbox all the way down the street away from her house. That's her right because that's her property. Maybe another person's okay with salespeople coming and knocking on his or her door occasionally. But imagine if the online world's rules applied to real life. You'd buy a house, but in this house, anybody can come in, listen to your conversations, see what medications and vitamins you're taking, write down what you watch on your TV, see what articles you're reading in the newspaper, and then they would use that to target ads to you. we'd never put up with that in real life. I don't know why we put up with that online.
Yeah, we shouldn't. We need to actually get our arms around the practices that have been in place for years. I am pumped that our lawmakers are catching up to the 21st century and that we're here just in the nick of time, the perfect time, really, to build this movement. ddpforall.com. Hopefully, we're going to get millions of Americans activated, and we're going to fight for your rights to do whatever the heck you want without anyone knowing what's going on. Or that was like a Beastie Boys. We're going to fight for your anyway. We're going to fight for your right to party online.
That's a good motto.
Yeah, I'm dating myself a little bit. Whatever. Like the young people still know the Beasties. I hope. I don't know. Enoch and I are contemporaries, so Enoch's down. Well, I am so glad to be your champion and partner in this. I'm grateful to you for fighting for consumer rights in this way, and grateful to you for coming to us with this data dividend project. We're going to make it happen for millions of Americans, and it's because folks like you actually decided to do something about it. So thank you, Enoch. I'm so glad that we've been friends these years and that my friends are doing such cool freaking stuff. Like instead of having friends who are like, hey, here's some bullshit. Instead, my friends are like, let's fight for people's data property rights. Let's get ourselves our own agency and autonomy back. Let's have us sharing the value. So I'm really just thrilled to be working with you on this.
And thank you, Andrew, for everything that you're doing for America, especially during this time of the pandemic. I know that Humanity Forward has been giving away money through UBI and through COVID pandemic relief. And you're really an inspiration to not just me, but millions of Americans out there. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Enoch. You don't have to say that. But I appreciate it, man. Let's do it. Let's make it a fair fight. Let's make it the people versus the tech companies and not just the person. So I'm thrilled to fight this fight with you.
Let's do it.